So let's get started. Let me just tell a few words about me. Few more. One more thing. I'm from Russia. If you're interested in that, so that's my burden to talk about hacking. Yeah, you're absolutely right about certifications. So I don't want to repeat them again. If you want to find me, here's the LinkedIn. So go ahead and find me there. So what this session is all about. I'm going to cover the typical misconfigurations that you may find in Azure, because Azure is pretty secure by itself. But when you use that, when companies use that, they have like very typical scenarios that may be compromised. I want to show you them. So because I do assessment and penetration tests for different companies, and quite often I find the repeatable scenarios, repeatable patterns. So I combine them all together in the single scenario, and so that's what I want to show you here. What is interesting about my session from my standpoint, in general, I don't really like to use slides. I prefer live demos. So this session mostly will be based on live demos. Of course, I'll show you some slides to just give you an idea where we are now. But most of the time, you may expect live demos. And in the end of the session, of course, I will answer your questions and I will give you some ideas. How can you mitigate that? But once again, that's going to be most of the session. Most of the time, I will show you some offensive things. All right. So let's get started. That's my agenda. So I will have like three environments, three different type of environments, and I will compromise them one by one. And so I will move from one environment to another. And so we're going to start from hybrid Active Directory. And so in my hybrid AD, I have the main controller, and I have what's called Azure AD Connect. And this service we can synchronize accounts, groups, users, and so on from on-prem Active Directory to the cloud. So company can reuse those accounts in the cloud. So let me just jump to demo and show you how it looks like. So here's the Azure AD Connect on the separate server. You may ask, all right, so AD Connect is very typical configuration. What's the problem with AD Connect? One of the problems with AD Connect is configuration, which is like recommended. Some part of the configuration is recommended. So when you configure AD Connect, you must create what's called AD forced account. This account will be created automatically. That's the most recommended ways to create automatically. And one of the things about this account, when you configure your AD Connect, you must specify different features. And if you specify a feature which is highly recommended called password hash sync, so it means that the hashes of passwords will be synchronized from on-prem AD to the cloud as well. If you enable this feature, and this feature is super useful, because in this case, in your Azure, your users will have the same password, and if you lose connectivity to on-prem, they will still be able to connect. So password hash sync is very recommended by Microsoft because it's resilient. But if you enable password hash sync, account for synchronization will have these permissions: replicate directory changes and replicate directory changes all. Let me jump back to demo and show you on the main controller this account. So just in case, if you haven't worked with AD Connect before, Azure AD Connect before, so that's the service that's installed on the separate server. During the configuration, you must create an account that will read Active Directory to grab accounts from there. And so the account that will be created for this synchronization is called like this: MSOL and random numbers and letters. Let me check permissions of this account. If I look at the properties of the main controller and go to Security tab, I can find this MSOL. And look at this. So it has replicating directory changes. So what does it mean if I have replicating directory changes? I think you're familiar with an attack called DC sync, when some attacker may synchronize some content from Active Directory. So in fact, replicating directory changes allowed me to do DC sync with Mimikatz. So this account became pretty powerful. But the question that you may have, all right, so this account is powerful, but what is the password? How can we find the password? Who can find the password? Generally speaking, this account, for this account, we don't know password normally, because this account generates automatically, and password is managed by AD Connect by itself. So you don't have access to password directly. But there is a way how can we do it. There is a way how can we get access. Let me jump back to AD Connect. And let's think about this. Let's think about this. So if we have AD Connect, if we have an AD Connect server, and AD Connect server somehow uses this account, so somewhere this password must be stored. This password is stored in SQL database. If I look at the SQL database that has the database of AD Connect, and I look at the management agent here, I can find, let me just remove columns I don't need. Remove this as well. Let's remove those. All right, so let me run again. And now let me find this account here and look at this. So account, I think I missed that. Oh yeah, here we go. So account is here. And it says password. We have password, but password is encrypted string. So we cannot have direct access to password. We can find a plain text password, because if I look here, it will be something encrypted. But it's possible to decrypt. And who can decrypt that? Anyone who has permissions of local administrator on AD Connect server. And here the typical misconfiguration is started, because companies think like, all right, if AD Connect is not a domain controller, so we may allow like a server administrators manage AD Connect because it's not domain controller. And also it has different, usually AD Connect has different baselines, not the same as domain controller has. Yeah, of course it has some different features, but anyway. So the typical misconfiguration when companies allow like server administrators manage AD Connect. Let me show you what we can do with that. So you can decrypt this password. You can do it manually, but it's a pain in the neck. So it will take a lot of time. It will be longer than I have for my session. But you may find also on the web the tool called AD Connect Dump. So just Google about this. You will find the tool, and you will find the article of author, and author describes how to do it manually. But for the sake of time, I will show that how can I do it with one click. So I just run the script on my server, on AD Connect server, with admin permissions. So I'm not the domain admin here. I'm just a regular local administrator, and I can have this username and password. So let me copy this value, this value, and jump to client workstation. So I'm going to open CMD. And I'm going to open CMD again as a different user. So paste here, and let's type this name and click OK. So now what I want to do, I want to run that very typical well-known command called DC sync using very well-known tool Mimikatz. And with DC sync, I can synchronize the main administrator. I can synchronize KRBTGT and create golden tickets. If I synchronize the main administrator, I can run pass the hash. So it will give me a lot of permissions. So first, before I start to do anything, let me check my permissions and who am I. So in one command line, I'm a Contosa JDOM. And what permissions do I have? Can I enumerate C drive of the main controller? No, I can't. Let's try another one. Here I'm MSIL. Can I enumerate the main controller? No. All right. So let's open Mimikatz first. As a MSIL account, let's run Mimikatz. And here I want to say, let's say dump DC sync, end user is going to be trainer, who is my domain administrator. And look at this. So now I have a hash of domain administrator. What next? Then I go to Mimikatz again, open as the regular domain user with local admin permission, of course, and run pass the hash. And so here I must copy and paste this hash. All right, so I have another command prompt. Let me just, oh, sorry, the wrong one. And yeah, I have access domain controller. So that's a typical problem when companies allow AD Connect to be managed by server administrators, and those administrators, they may become domain admins. And we find it very often at many companies, this configuration. So let me jump back to here. So now we compromised on-prem Active Directory and with AD Connect, and we became domain admins. Now from here, let's move to the next infrastructure, which is virtual machines. So we have virtual machines in Azure, and they have, in my case, a Jenkins application installed. To be fair, it doesn't really matter what is installed there. I use Jenkins just an example because Jenkins may have multiple nodes with different operating system. In my case, Windows and Linux. I just want to show you how Linux and Windows may be compromised in the same manner. So let's move on, and I'm going to jump back to demo. And just want to continue this previous demo and transit to the next scenario. So now I'm a domain admin, and I need somehow to get into Azure, and if I want to pen test virtual machines. So if I'm a domain admin, I have multiple ways to do it. So first of all, I can create a new account in Active Directory and add account to some sort of groups. And if those groups, they have permissions in Azure, all of this will be synchronized. That's a bit noisy, first of all. And second problem, I don't know what groups should I use, because what groups have permissions I need. I can try a different thing. Since I'm a domain admin, I can also try to connect to any workstation. And if I connect the workstation of administrators or developers, I can find something interesting there. Let me share that real quick. So first of all, I'm going to open a workstation that, let's say, belongs to me, and I want to remove just one thing there. All right, that's fine. Now, let me open CMD on developer machine. Now let's type AZ account list and output a table. It doesn't really matter. I can do anything. And look at this. So it shows me my subscriptions. Now, if I do the same on the different workstation, AZ account list and output a table. So fingers crossed, it should give me an error. Come on. Oh, so it doesn't work. So that's AZ. That's the tool that very commonly used by administrators and developers to administer Azure environment. And so when I showed you before, the previous workstation, I typed the command and it didn't ask me for a password. Here it says, hey, you must authenticate first. So it looks like those authentication token cached somewhere. And let's find where this token is. If I go to user profile, and here's the folder and profile called .azure, and the token will be cached here. And if I'm a domain admin, I can connect to any workstation, and nothing stops me from getting this ticket. Let me take not ticket, but token. So let me zip it and copy that to my machine. All right, and let's extract here. All right, let's try again. Cross your fingers for me. And come on. Yeah. Now I have access to Azure as some sort of administrator. I don't know which one. I mean, I don't know what permissions I have, but I know that I'm there. I can do something there. And I wasn't asked for a password. And what is the most important, it didn't prompt me. It didn't show me any MFA prompts. So I can manage Azure now from my workstation, and I don't have to be authenticated. I don't even need to create the fancy ways to bypass MFA just here in the safe credentials. So now if I have an access, let's try to pen test virtual machines. Of course, in the usual pen test, we have a very long reconnaissance phase. I don't want to waste your time here because reconnaissance it takes time. Let me just quickly check what virtual machines I have here. So, do I have any machines? Yeah, I do. And since my target, once again, is Jenkins and both VMs of Jenkins, I want to take those two VMs, and play with them a bit. Jenkins Master and Jenkins Slave. Just want to quickly remind you that Jenkins Master is Windows server, and Jenkins Slave is a Linux server. All right, so what can I do with virtual machines? For this demo, first I want to jump to the portal and show you in a more visual manner, and then I will get back to the command prompt and will complete my attack. So if I go to Azure portal, and I open any virtual machine, let me open Jenkins Master. For any virtual machine, you may find this command called run commands. And under run commands for Windows, it will be run PowerShell script. So you may run PowerShell script, execute PowerShell script. It says here you may execute PowerShell script. If this is Linux, of course, it will be shell script. So that's the same for both operating system types, just a different type of scripts, of course, PowerShell or shell. But now, what is the most important about those virtual machines, about this feature? What permissions you must have to run this feature? Oh, by the way, why do we need this feature in general? You know that cloud is abstraction, and they want us to administer cloud or fix some problems without logging locally to virtual machine. So I can try to do it. I can try to run some scripts and fix something or configure something in virtual machine without local login. And now my goal will be use this feature to bypass authentication and get into virtual machine from my current position. Let me show you what permissions I must have if I want to use this feature. So if I go to roles in Azure, and I can click very typical role called reader. So, and for many companies, they think, oh, that's just a reader. This role cannot do anything bad or so just it can read it and nothing more. So this role quite often you may find on subscription level and will be inherited by other resources. So let me click reader, look at the permissions, and find compute here. Damn it, sorry. And look at this. Run command. This feature is available for readers. All right. Now we know what it is, so I can run PowerShell scripts and shell scripts as well. Now let's jump back and do it. So first, before I start running scripts, what do I want to run? Probably, if I want to get access to those virtual machines, it will be shell. I mean, reverse shell, of course. Metasploit, but if you have antivirus, maybe a bad idea, or something custom, which is better idea. So let me first establish Netcat listener on this port and another port for Windows. So let's try. First, let's try Linux. That's how can I do it from this command prompt. Let's click here. By the way, this feature is not super fast, so let me just wait a bit. It should be here. Fingers crossed again. Once again, it takes time before that will be executed. Hopefully it will be. And I didn't block it. Oh, look at this. So I have the shell on Linux. Now let's try the same trick with Windows. For Windows, we don't have any native shells. Of course, you may try something like PowerShell, Nishan shell, or whatever. I just did a different thing. I just create my own shell on Python. And so I will download that and just run it. And it shouldn't be detected by antiviruses because it's my custom thing. All right, let's run that. And let's wait for Windows shell as well. Let me just first explore Linux. Let's see, if I type ID here, I can see I'm root. Why I'm root? Am I running this VM as a root? Doesn't really matter. Oh, look at this. We have a shell for Windows as well. Doesn't really matter because this feature to run commands work on behalf of a local system or on behalf of root. So on Linux, I'm root. On Windows, I'm local system. And I can do whatever I want now on those virtual machines. Isn't cool? For companies, it may look like, oh, we just enabled reader feature. Who cares? But that's what I can do if I have reader permissions on virtual machine level. So let me just do one more thing. Let me open Jenkins Error Log. I know it's not really important about the Jenkins itself, but let me just check what I can find here, and I can find here the password of Jenkins. It's the initial password there. It will be an error log. So let me try to what is the address? I forgot. Let me try to log into Jenkins. And this is my password. And yeah, that works fine. So that is virtual machine. To be fair, I don't really care if it's Jenkins or something else. I just want to show you how virtual machines may be compromised. All right. So let's jump to the last scenario. And now we have something more advanced. We have a PaaS application, a platform as a service. So here I have my application deployed on app service. It stored data in Azure SQL database. And it doesn't store credentials directly on the web application. So we store credentials in Key Vault. And also credentials there will be rotated by this function. And also I have web application firewall or WAF to protect application from outside. So what can I do here? How can I try to compromise this application? Probably my goal will be a SQL database because the data should be there. But how can I do it? Where should I start? So of course I can start from web application, but if I want to move on, I must have so my goal is database. And so if I look at the web application, I will not find credentials there. Even if I get into the web application. So it should be some different path to try to get into SQL database. And that is going to be this function. Of course, this is less typical misconfiguration, but but that's what we also sometimes find in our customers. So when we have Key Vault and credentials there, it's recommended by Microsoft to rotate those credentials. So it means it will use some function, which is serverless application. I know if you're more familiar with Amazon, it's like a Lambda in Amazon or function in Azure. And so the special function will run periodically based on some triggers, and you may define triggers yourself, and rotate the credentials stored in Key Vault and in SQL database password as well. So it will rotate those credentials. Application will get transparently because it has access only to Key Vault, and so at the same time it will change the password in SQL database and rotate this secret in Key Vault. So what is a typical problem with this configuration? So it seems very, very secure, but typical problem here, because Key Vault, companies know that Key Vault it contains corporate secrets, and they're very careful with Key Vault. But when they have this function, what also may be found that they did not break inheritance, and they still have this inheritance permissions or either access to this function. And let's see what I can do if I have access to function. So I may not have access to Key Vault, but I may have access to function. And also, by the way, Key Vault has a separate configuration to get access to keys, but I may, or secrets, but I may have access to function. And on behalf of function, I can get access from this Key Vault. Let's try that. I'm going to switch back to my demo as usual. And first, I'm going to show you on the portal what Key Vault itself. Let me open the Key Vault here. And if I go to secrets, look at this. So it says your policy, so the policy that configured at this moment does not allow you to see those values. Let me just quickly give myself permissions. I don't have permissions here at all. Let me just say, just allow the list permissions, secrets. Save. All right, let's get back. So I have two secrets here: a username that's used by database, and password, which is used by database as well. Now let me get permissions back. So let me remove them. Remove the permissions. And now let's test this this function. Before I test that, let me also show you how this function looked like. So I'm going to open function application. And this function is, by the way, is deployed just right from the Microsoft GitHub, from Microsoft page. And it's recommended. Let me go to functions. And here we have two functions. First one is triggered by custom events. Second one will be triggered by HTTP trigger. All right, so two functions here. Now let me tell you about problems with configuration. If I have permissions to read that, what I can do, by default, there are two misconfigurations will be here. Misconfiguration number one, companies, they usually don't use FTP to publish their functions, but by default, FTP is turned on. So that's a default FTP state to access function. And so they don't turn off FTP access. That's the first one, first misconfiguration. Second one, I can read data. And so what I can do here, I can get publish profile. And in this profile, I will find FTP credentials. So let's jump back to my demo environment. And let's do it. Let's close this. And let's do it. Oh, by the way, let's do it from here because I will use FileZilla for these purposes. And so I don't need to jump from one window to another. Let's first get FTP address of this function. So let me function application. Let me copy this address, place here, and now I want to have credentials. Command will look like this, and now I have this username and password as well. Let's click connect. now I have a bunch of folders here. I want to have this function, which is triggered by HTTP. And what I did, I renamed the standard, like a previous function, which was a PowerShell script. And I called to run one because the function that will run just must have this name. And I placed my own PowerShell code, and this code will exfiltrate data from Key Vault. So let's get data from Key Vault. Let me just run. And this is, it may be triggered by HTTP triggers, so I can do it right from here. Let me just run this trigger, and let's just wait for a moment before it's going to give me credentials. Should give me at least. Hopefully it will. All right, so in parallel, let me open new tab because it will be super. I'll just close that and open FileZilla again because we will use that later on. All right, so now I have information from Key Vault. So the username called web app and the password is password. And that's the credentials that application use to connect to database. So I can try to connect database myself. Let's do it real quick. So first of all, I'm going to open SQL Management Studio. And I can say here, so here, this address, that's not addressed to MySQL, not MySQL, MS SQL, of course. So I connected normally. And now let's try to do the same from the different machine. Oh, damn it. So I need to have this address. And look at this. I cannot connect from this machine because it says, hey, the firewall in Azure will not allow you to connect to database. So you must whitelist this IP address and here, so you must sign in with permissions, with credentials that have permissions to manage firewall. Let me jump back to portal and show you this firewall. So if I go to SQL database, and open firewall. So what I can find here, so it doesn't have any rules except one rule. This rule says, allow Azure services and the resources to access this server. And that's another problem that I usually find in company environment, because I was able to log in from this machine because this machine in Azure, but this Azure that's a different subscription. That's a different region. Many companies think that if they say yes here, they allow access of their resources that they have to this SQL database, like their virtual machine will have access. No, not at all. Any Azure address from any customer from any region in the world, if it belongs to Azure, will have access to your database. Of course, you must have username and password, but firewall will not block it. So the better solution will be turn it off and deny public access at all. So in this case, I can connect to a SQL database only from my web application. Let me run my web application. By the way, my application on a free tier, so that works fine, even on free tier. Oh no, that's not the free tier anymore. So I migrate from free tier right before the demo, and so that's a simple application, and I can just say something like, "Hey, besides user," and let me just add password as well. Except, oh, sorry, email. B at sites.com. And that's working normal. That's working fine, this database. It looks like application has access to database, normal access. If I try to, let me just reconnect to this database from Azure machine, but I don't have access anymore. So it says access only allowed, only private access allowed. So what I can do here, I can try to access database from the actual application. For these purposes, I'm going to jump back to my demo. So I think I have 10 minutes. So I should speed up a bit. So let me just get the FTP address. So I will do the same, absolutely the same. I will get address of FTP address of this application. Let me just take this address, because those applications, they use the same approach as key vault. Oh, sorry, it's here. It's here. And let me, oh, the wrong one. And let's take credentials as well and connect via FTP again. All right, so I can see here PHP page and just one pager. And you can guess if I have PHP application, I can upload my shell. I have FTP access, I can upload my shell and execute on the server side. Oh, damn it, sorry. And now I have access to this server. All right, the last problem I have is how can I connect with SQL database? I need to have some tools to connect, but looks like I'm not an admin here. Oh, by the way, before I start to do anything, let me establish the new shell, because this one is not super interactive, you know, that's a web shell. So let me just establish the new shell. Yeah. So let's see, ID. So I just a regular www user, not privileged user. So for these purposes, I need to have some tools that may work without installation. And this tool is called uSQL. This tool allows me to connect the database without installation. So let me connect the database. And looks like I did. Let's try to get tables. A list of tables. So I can see 2 tables here. And let's try to get content of table called registration. And now I have this B-sides user there. All right, so that's what I can do. That's what I can do to find the path to this application. Of course, all of this that I show you here, I found partially for many companies. It's not one company that has all of those vulnerabilities and misconfigurations, more correct. But some of those misconfigurations may be found in many companies, and I just combine all of those things together. All right, so last thing is we have application gateway, web application firewall, and what it is. So I don't want to explain you what WAF is, because that's a security conference, and probably all of you know what WAF is. I just want to show you the built-in WAF that we have in Azure. So we have firewall on the gateway level, and it's nothing more than very well-known open source firewall. Forgot the name of the firewall. Open source. Damn it. Sorry. Let me just go there and find the address. And let's try to run some injections, and access denied. So I cannot run injection on this level. So and that this WAF is just available in Azure, but of course, if you wish, you may try some other firewalls. To be fair, that was my plan, but it looks like we have six more minutes. So let me discuss with you how can we mitigate all of those things. So you saw here that we compromised 3 different environments, and the typical question: how can we? All right, so we now we know we have problems. What to do with them? So let's start to try to fix them. I will not show you all of those how to fix, but give you some ideas. In the first scenario, when we have when we compromised directory, very bad idea will be disable password hash sync. No, that's not not what should we do. I know some companies that prefer to disable that, but I don't recommend, because you will have more problems than benefits. But you should keep in mind, AD Connect may lead anyone to domain admin permissions. So if you allow access to AD Connect, then this user may become domain admin easily. So be careful about who can manage. I highly recommend you to allow management of AD Connect only by domain administrators. Next one, this environment. Be careful about permissions. Keep in mind, reader. Just the reader can do it. So do not give permissions even of reader to the user who shouldn't have those permissions. Keep in mind, even a reader may be pretty powerful. And finally, let's take a look here. Here I can give you a bunch of recommendations. So first of all, credentials of key vault. If we use key rotation, the permissions here and permissions here must be equal. So, but unfortunately, find typical case when we have smaller permissions here on key vault, and at the same time, some other users, some administrators, middle level administrators, they have access to actual function that may rotate credentials, and then they may use, of course, doesn't mean they use that, but they may use a function to get data from application. Also, disable FTP. Don't allow FTP here, because probably you don't use that. Disable public access. Allow only private access. Even with private access, we can have access to internal infrastructure. I mean, the actual database using the application. But if you have public access, then you're absolutely open to the world. Even if you enable just even if you allow only from Azure, you still open to many, not to everyone, but to many. And finally, WAF. Go ahead and use WAF. It doesn't have to be Azure WAF, like built in Azure. It doesn't have to be built in, but it should be. Last thing, by the way, about WAF I want to show you is when I test this WAF by one of the fuzzers, like in my case it was WAF Ninja. This built-in WAF showed me this. So by the way, I finally remember the name. It's Mod Security, open source Mod Security, well-known software-based firewall, but they have pretty well-configured rules. So all of those attempts to bypass bypass firewall, they were not successful. I tried to run SQL injection and it didn't work. All right. So now, if you have any questions, go ahead.
Thanks, Sergey. That was an amazing talk and demo. One of the things that blew my mind was the access to any Azure resource anywhere in the world for any client, any customer of Azure. That was crazy. I don't even know why that's allowed. But anyway, we only have time for maybe one question. One of them that came in was, how do we guard against abuse of the reader privilege in VM-based attacks?
Don't give permissions. That's the obvious answer, because let me give a bit more details here. So reader role is a role that built in. Don't use built-in roles. So if I go to roles here and let me go to the level of a resource group at least. If I click add, and click add the role, here's the custom role. Create custom roles according to principle of least privileges, because built-in roles, they have to, even if they sound like, hey, just a reader, they over-privileged. So create custom roles and provide only minimum privileges that you really need to provide.
Very good. That was an excellent talk, Sergey. Thanks very much.